This is the start of a wonderful book. It's called Hawaii Takata's Story. It's written by Helen Haberle, and it's the story of Reiki. So Mrs. Takata was actually friends with Helen Haberle and also was her master teacher. Now, I feel kind of passionate about this book because I have been teaching Reiki for the last 25 years. And I've also been practicing it, of course. And I went on to become a Lightarian Reiki master as well. But this book really fills in a lot of gaps for me because Mrs. Takata is such a hero for me, such an inspiration. Because I'm in Canada, and Mrs. Takata actually brought Reiki to Canada. So if it weren't for her, I would never have heard of it, gotten into it, or lived it. So I hope you're going to find this story as interesting as I did. After I'm done with it, I'll talk about my own experience teaching Reiki, doing Reiki. If you want, leave a comment below or leave a like. And the more enthusiasm I get on this reading, the more likely I am to actually talk about my own experience. Reiki, Mrs. Takata's Story, Chapter 1. Once upon a time, for all proper stories begin with once upon a time. A gift of great value was given to the children of earth. Not all people recognized it as a great gift or honored it as such, but it was nonetheless a wondrous offering to those who could understand and accept what had been given. Throughout the ages, there had been stories of this magical gift, which came to be called healing. It has been talked of in many times, in many places, in such ancient lands as Egypt and Tibet and China and other countries past remembering. Some said that it was just a myth without substance. Others declared it was so. Many such stories grew around the activities of great teachers who had come to earth, the avatars, for it was said that each of them had brought this gift of healing when they had come to share their messages of truth with the children of earth. Yet such magic was no longer known nor practiced, and there were few, if any, who could truly say such a thing had ever existed. There were many legends about the healing miracles of great teachers, but such stories were easily dismissed when there had been no demonstrations of it for hundreds of years, if indeed such events had ever occurred. Those who insisted upon proof found none, so the ones who believed that such things were possible held this quietly to themselves, knowing there was no way to prove what they believed. Into this 19th century world of skepticism was born in Japan a child who was named Mikao Usui, a boy destined to become a scholar and philosopher as well as a profound healer. And then it says in italics, following is the story of Dr. Mikao Usui and his connection with Dr. Hayashi as told by Mrs. Takata. Educated by missionaries, Mikao Usui became a Christian and eventually rose to a position of eminence as the head of a Christian boys' school in Kyoto. In his dual role of minister and principal, Dr. Usui worked among his students until one morning at chapel service, several of the senior students politely questioned him during the service, asking him if he believed the Bible, literally believed. When Dr. Usui replied that he did, they then wanted him to demonstrate his belief by performing a miracle, one such as Jesus had done. As Dr. Usui was unable to do this, his students declared his to be a blind faith and insufficient to bolster their own, for they needed more than blind faith in order to believe. Dr. Yusui was struck with the enormity of this questioning, and he asked the young men not to lose their faith. He declared his intention to immediately resign his position and to travel to a Christian country of the West where he would learn how to do the miracles of Jesus, returning then to Kyoto to give literal proof of his beliefs. America was his destination, where he enrolled in a Chicago university to study more deeply the Christian scriptures. His interest was centered on the healing miracles, and when it became apparent that he could not learn from his studies how Jesus healed, he began to delve into the sacred writings of the other great world religions. Eventually, he concentrated on the Buddhist writings, having learned that Buddha and his early disciples had performed healing. Intuitively, he sensed that the answer he wanted would be found in this tradition. After 7 years in America, Dr. Yusui decided to return to Kyoto, where he would be able to study more fully the Buddhist sutras. There he visited many temples and monasteries, talking to the monks about healing. They were in agreement that Buddha had healed. However, this practice had been dropped from Buddhism, with the monks concerning themselves only with spiritual health and leaving the physical healing to the doctors. In the course of his search, Dr. Yusui met a Zen abbot who invited him to remain in his monastery while pursuing his studies. The invitation was accepted, and for several years Dr. Yusui remained with these monks. He studied first the writings in Japanese, and not finding what he sought, he decided perhaps much had been lost in the translations. Since Buddhism had been brought to Japan from China, he then learned Chinese, and he read the sutras in that language. He knew he was closer, but he still did not find exactly what he wanted. Again, he questioned the translation, deciding to learn Sanskrit, since Buddhism had come originally from India. He became a Sanskrit master, and it was in this language that Dr. Yusui finally found what he had been seeking. The secrets of healing were his. He had found the symbols, yet he did not know what to do with them, nor how to use them. Not willing to accept this as the final answer, he decided to go a few miles outside Kyoto to a mountain that he considered to be sacred. There he would fast and meditate for 3 weeks in the expectation that he would be shown the meaning of the information that he had found. He discussed his intention with the abbot, with a request that if he did not return on the 21st day, some monks be sent up the mountain the next day to collect his bones. He did not intend to return without an answer. Dr. Yusui walked to this mountain, some 17 miles from the city, and he found a quiet place near a stream where he sat in meditation, allowing himself only water during the long fast. To keep track of the days, he placed beside him a pile of 21 small stones, discarding one each day until only one remained. Thus, in the very early morning of the last day, he sat in the darkness which preceded the dawn, looking out into the heavens where he saw a distant light in the black sky. As he watched, this light became bright and appeared to rush toward him. Nearer and nearer it sped, and he realized it would strike him if he continued to sit there. His first impulse was to dodge, and then he thought of the years that he had searched for an answer. So he sat motionless, determined to allow this experience. The light struck him in the forehead, and he lost consciousness. When he came into awareness again, the sun was high in the sky, shining brightly, and he knew several hours had passed. Yet he had total recall of everything that had occurred during this period of time. When the light struck him, he became aware of beautiful colors, one after another, all the hues of the rainbow. This was followed by an intense white light, after which large transparent bubbles appeared before his eyes, each containing one of the symbols that he had found in the Sanskrit writings. As a bubble would move into his field of vision and pause, the instruction in the use of this symbol would be given. As soon as he had committed the information to memory, the bubble would move away and another one would replace it with a different symbol. And in this fashion, Dr. Usui was given the full teachings in the meaning of the symbols. He now had the secrets for which he had searched. He knew this was the universal life energy, which he called Reiki, and thus was born the Usui system of Reiki healing. Full of energy and eager to return to Kyoto, Dr. Usui arose from his long meditation and strode down the mountain. As he rushed along, he stubbed his toe quite painfully, so he immediately put to the test what he had learned. He grasped his toe, and he experienced an instant healing, and he received the first validation of the truth of his vision. As he continued down the mountain, he realized that he was very hungry. So, coming to a roadside food stand, he seated himself at a table which was covered with a red cloth, an indication that it was open for business. An old man came from the nearby kitchen to take the order. Seeing Dr. Usui's beard and dusty robe, he assumed this meant a long meditation upon the mountain, and he was reluctant to bring his guest the usual meal. Instead, he wanted to cook some rice gruel, knowing that after such a long fast, the stomach needs a gentle introduction back into solid food. Dr. Usui did not want to wait, so insisting on having whatever was ready and available, he was served pickled vegetables and rice, from which he suffered no ill effects. The meal was brought by the old man's granddaughter, who was in much pain from an infected tooth. Her face was swollen, and she had tied a cloth around it, so Dr. Usui asked permission to touch her cheek. The pain immediately ceased, and the swelling went down, prompting her and her grandfather to agree that this was a most unusual monk. Dr. Usui was elated to have another indication of the truth of his instruction as he proceeded towards Kyoto. The monks greeted him with gladness, pleased that he had returned on the 21st day alive and healthy. Inquiring after the head of the monastery, he learned that the abbot was in his quarters, suffering from great pain from arthritis. So as soon as he had bathed and had dressed in clean robes, Dr. Usui went to make his report. The abbot was very happy to hear that the search of long years had been rewarded, and that the secrets of healing had been revealed. He asked for a demonstration, which immediately relieved his pain. The two men discussed what should be done with this great knowledge, and Dr. Usui decided to go into the vast slums of Kyoto, where he would offer the healing to the beggars. He would then send the younger ones on to the monastery, where they would be trained by the monks in skills which would help them earn their living. In those days, the slums were an unsafe place for strangers to enter, for the beggars banded together under a leader, and they did not welcome others among them. Dr. Usui sought out the chief of the beggars, asking permission to live there and to heal the people, his only requirements being a place to sleep and to do his work, along with 3 bowls of rice a day. His request was granted, so he moved into this area and he started the healing work among these poor people, a task that fully occupied his time for a number of years. Eventually, he began to notice familiar faces as he walked about the neighborhood, and upon inquiry, he learned that these were indeed some of the young people that he had healed and sent to the monastery for training. They had returned to the slums because they found earning a living to be much harder than going out to beg each day. Upon hearing this, Dr. Yusui felt himself to be a great failure, so he left the slums immediately, withdrawing to meditate upon what had happened. He remembered his early discussions with the monks, in which they spoke of their deep concern with the spiritual healing of their followers, and he realized that although he had been very successful in balancing the physical bodies of the beggars, he had had no concern for their spiritual health. At this time, he added Reiki healing to his 5 spiritual precepts, and the precepts are as follows. Just for today, do not worry. Just for today, do not anger. Honor your teachers, your parents, your neighbors, your friends. Give thanks for all living things. Earn your living honestly. Dr. Yusui also realized that in his giving away Reiki healing so freely, the beggars had developed no appreciation for it. They had no gratitude for this wonderful gift that they had been given through him. He determined never again to give Reiki healing to anyone who did not appreciate it. He began to travel throughout Japan, from town to town, teaching others about Reiki healing. He was a wise and clever teacher, so having arrived in a town where he knew no one, he would walk through the marketplace in the daytime carrying a lighted torch. The people would laugh and they would make fun of such a silly man carrying a torch when the sun was shining, thus capturing their attention. Dr. Yusui would invite them to attend his meeting that evening if they really wanted to learn about the light. In this way, he gathered the people to hear the story of Reiki healing, after which many wanted to learn how to do this healing. He developed a large following of students, and in the mid-1920s, he met a man who became his most dedicated disciple, Dr. Hayashi, 47-year-old reserve naval officer. With the transition of Dr. Yusui, Dr. Hayashi carried on this tradition of teaching and healing from his clinic in Tokyo. Dr. Hayashi was born from an illustrious family whose country home was in Atami. When he decided to open a clinic, Tokyo was chosen as the location which allowed Reiki healing to be offered to a larger group of people and attracted the affluent and the educated, even a high-ranking segment of Japanese society, the nobility. In one generation, Reiki healing had leaped from the slums of Kyoto to the palaces of Tokyo. He acquired a property large enough to accommodate both a clinic and a home for his family, with a beautiful garden between 2 areas to provide privacy. Mrs. Hayashi also worked in the clinic, greeting the patients as they arrived and assisting Dr. Hayashi as he supervised this thriving practice, where daily 16 practitioners gave Reiki healing treatments. It was to this clinic that a young woman named Mrs. Takata came in the fall of 1935, seeking relief from her multiple ailments. At that time, no one recognized the role she would play in the history of Reiki healing. And that concludes Chapter 1. And I hope you'll join me again for Chapter 2. I hope you're enjoying this. And till soon. Reiki, Hawayo Takata's story, Chapter 2. The story of Hawayo Takata began in 1900, early in the morning of Christmas Eve when she was born on the island of Kauai, Hawaii, as was the custom of the immigrants from Japan in the late 1800s. Her parents sought the services of a midwife for the occasion, so when the mother asked the time of birth, the response was that it was dawn and the sun was just coming up over the hill. The mother then requested that the baby be bathed and wrapped in a new blanket and held by the midwife to face the sun, while naming the child Hawaii in honor of the newly formed territory of Hawaii. Hawaii's father worked in the sugarcane fields of the nearby plantation, and life in this village was very simple with much hard labor. She attended public school, as did all the village children, a pleasure for her since she enjoyed learning. When she was 12 years old, she joined the other students who went to the plantation fields to work during the summer cutting cane seedlings. The cane cutters would go out on large fields to cut down the tall stalks with sharp knives. Then the children would lop off the tops, filling gunny bags with these short pieces of cane. Hawaii went to the fields with the others, and she worked diligently, but it was very difficult for her because she was quite small and delicate. She did her best to fill the bag, but when the supervisor shook it, it was only 3/4 full, and she had to fill it to the top again. She saw her companions getting farther and farther ahead, and afraid of being left alone, she began to cry. 2 family friends who were cutting cane nearby saw her distress and offered to help her, using part of their lunch hour to fill her bags completely. This continued all summer, and with the help of her friends, she was able to keep up with her schoolmates. On the last day, when the work was ended, the other children clambered aboard the cane car behind the locomotive, waiting to take them home. But Hawaii sat down on the ground and lifted her hands heavenward to offer up her petition that she never have to do this work again, saying, "God, please, please let me do better things with my hands and do not send me back to the cane field again forever and ever." Little did she realize that her prayer would be granted fully 25 years later with Reiki healing. But somehow, year after year, when her friends went back to the fields to earn their summer money, she had other jobs and never returned to the cane field. This scene in the field was observed and taken to heart by the locomotive engineer, who came one day to talk about it with Hawaii's father. He told of the difficulties she had had and how her friends had helped fill the bags. Her father had not known that she was having problems in the fields, but he understood that she was not going to be a good worker because of her small size. So when the principal of the church boarding school asked if she might live in his house and assist with teaching the first grade, deep consideration was given to this request. Assured that she could complete her education by doing her own grade work at night, permission was given for her to go. Every Friday, when she returned home for the weekend, she gave her wages to her parents, a $5 gold piece and a silver dollar, which was a great help to her family. In 1914, she attended the opening of a store in Luhu, some 20 miles from her home. This was an unusual event with many people coming to see the new store, so business was active that day. The man who was in charge of the soda fountain knew Hawaii and asked if she could lend a hand since he was overworked, so she agreed to wash the dishes and to help serve the customers. When the store closed that evening, he drove her home in his buggy, and he spoke to his parents, saying he was in need of a helper, and would they allow Hawaii to have that job? Again, deep thought was given, and it was agreed that she could help him on Saturdays, that she had 2 jobs while she was still a student, and when she finished public school, she automatically had a full-time job at the store. She continued to live at the boarding school where she attended Japanese school from 6 to 8 in the morning, and then she walked 7 miles to work. And after a time, the manager asked her to come into the office and file papers during her spare time at the soda fountain. So with 2 jobs, there was never a dull moment and very few for relaxation. One day, came to the store a very elegant lady, the daughter of a wealthy plantation owner, who took notice of the girl because she was pleased with the service she had given, and she soon offered Hawayo a job, promising to supply room and board, clothing, and double the salary earned at the store. Since she already had a good job and this involved a major move, it was a difficult decision. Finally, she accepted the lady's invitation to visit during vacation. She had never seen such an estate. A beautiful mansion, 5 cottages, a big stable as well, and other outbuildings needed for the plantation. She was introduced to the cook, who urged her to stay, saying the work was not hard, the pay was good, and she would be dressed very beautifully in kimono and obi. Her parents too readily agreed, since she would no longer live so far away at the boarding school, making it possible to visit them every weekend. She decided to ask the store manager to release her with a recommendation, so if she failed in the new job, she could go back to the old one. Thus began her association with this lady, one which was to continue for 24 years, starting as a waitress pantry girl and eventually promoted to number 1 housekeeper. And because she had experience with bookkeeping at the store, she began to handle the paychecks as well as supervise 21 staff members. When she began working in this home, the plantation company's bookkeeper was Saichi Takada, a young man to whom she was introduced, and in time married. This was a good marriage, made even more so with the birth of 2 daughters. Although busy with their employment and family, there was still time for Sachi to serve on the welfare board of the district, the first person of Oriental descent to be appointed to such a position by the territorial governor, and he took pride in his assignment. He helped with service clubs and sports activities, as he was a baseball fan and a pitcher himself. His life was full, and they did not realize how short it was to be. One October morning in 1930, while still at the breakfast table, he spoke to Hawayo of his views on life and death, expressing his understanding that to everything there is born, there will come an end of change, which he called transition, that everything goes through a great change, and there is, in truth, no death. And in the human life, when this time comes, no one can stop it. He instructed her, should he go into transition first, not to be shocked, not to grieve, but instead to look up and smile, for then he would know that she also understood the laws of nature. He told her how he wanted his memorial meal to be arranged, leaving 1 chair open, for he would be there. He also told her not to bury him. In Hawaii, he did not want a grave, for she would be attached to that place. She did not want to accept what he said, and declared her need for his help at her side, teaching her and giving advice and courage. He assured her that this would be possible in any case, for nothing is impossible, and he knew she would try very hard even if he were not with her. It was difficult to believe any of this would happen. But on the 3rd day after this conversation, Saichi made his transition, very suddenly at the young age of 34. This was a great shock and loss, not only to Hawayo and the family, but also to the community, and also everything. And although everything was done according to his wishes, she was very sad, and she missed him greatly. Reiki, Chapter 3. After her husband's transition, she kept her word and worked very hard to provide financial care for her family. From 1930 to 35, she had very little rest, and finally she suffered a nervous breakdown from overwork. In addition, she had severe physical problems, a painful abdominal condition which required surgery, and respiratory problems which prevented the use of anesthetic. The doctor informed her that she must have the surgery if she were to live, and since it appeared that she would not survive the operation, he felt he could not accept responsibility for it. She was in a desperate situation, and she knew that she was losing ground. So at night, when her chores were completed, she would sit under a big camphor tree, where she sought peace of mind and meditation. She was not yet 35 years old, but she felt 60, for she was unable to walk upright because of the pain in her abdomen. At times she was having great difficulty breathing. She looked into the heavens and she prayed for guidance, not knowing which way to turn. One such night, when it was so dark that there was not even a star in sight, she heard very clearly a voice from above telling her that she would have even more problems, and the first thing for her to do was to recover her health, for only then would she be able to work and earn, thus assuring security and a long life. She bowed her head to the earth in thankfulness, and she accepted the message, asking to be shown the way to accomplish it. Within 3 weeks, one of her sisters died very suddenly after a 4-day illness. It was a very sorrowful moment in Hawaii's life, for it was her duty to deliver this sad news to her parents, who were in Japan at the time, having returned for a 1-year stay in their family home in Yamaguchi, her father's first visit since his immigration to Hawaii 40 years previously. To have written this news in a letter would have been too great a shock, so she decided to go to Japan personally to see them and to seek also some relief for her poor state of health. Accompanied by her sister-in-law, she set forth on the steamship. For 5 years she had waited for some means of taking her husband's ashes to Kyoto for a service at the Otani Temple, so she carried them with her. Aboard ship she met a Buddhist minister from Kona, Hawaii, who would be in residence at this large temple, and he offered his assistance by taking charge of the urn, carrying it to Kyoto while she went to Yamaguchi, with the understanding that she would meet him at the Otani Temple in 6 months, March of 1936. This would allow time for her to go to her parents and afterwards enter a Tokyo hospital for treatment to improve her health. After the services for her sister, she went to Tokyo and she entered a small private hospital in Akasaka. The surgeon agreed her body needed much attention, but decided against an immediate operation. Instead, he urged her to think of this place not as a hospital, but as a resort where she was to rest and eat well, and when she'd gained some weight, they would consider what was to be done. It was 3 weeks before he called her in for a thorough examination, and he confirmed that she had a tumor, gallstones, and appendicitis, these being the cause of her abdominal pain. He then scheduled her for surgery at 7 a.m. the next day. Early in the morning, she was taken to the operating room, where her body was prepared for surgery. The nurses were arranging the sterilized instruments, the gauze, and the equipment, while the doctors were at the sink scrubbing their hands. Mrs. Takata was lying very still on a surgical table, eyes closed, listening to the splashing of the water and the conversations, when suddenly she heard quite clearly a voice saying, "The operation is not necessary. The operation is not necessary." She opened her eyes and she looked around, but no one was speaking. She pinched herself to make sure she was not dreaming. She decided if she heard the voice a third time, she would accept it. It was even louder the third time. "The operation is not necessary." She knew she was awake and sane, but what could she do? The voice said, "Ask, ask, ask." Whom should she ask? The head surgeon. The head surgeon. The head surgeon. She slipped off the table. She stood on the floor. sheet wrapped around her, and the nurses rushed over, began to scold her for spoiling their preparations for surgery. The doctors also came, and the surgeon, expressing concern that she might be reacting from the fear of the operation. She assured him that this was not so and that she was not afraid, not even nervous, but she did have a question for him. Did he know of any treatment or therapy that would help her? He thought a few moments, and then he said he did, but it would depend on how much time she was willing to spend in Tokyo. There was no way to know how long this treatment might take. 2 weeks, 2 months, a year, and likely it would not work if she came for both a cure and a tour of Japan in 60 days, because he had said a year. She doubted it, declaring she could say, because he had said a year, she doubted it, declaring she could stay 2 years since health was her first concern, not sightseeing. The doctor sent for his sister, who was also a hospital dietitian, and she took Mrs. Takada by streetcar to another section of the city to his studio, where a drugless treatment was given. They were welcomed by Mrs. Hayashi, the director's wife, who also served as the receptionist. And when Mrs. Takada's turn came, she entered the treatment room, where she saw 8 couches with 16 men practitioners giving treatments under the supervision of Dr. Chujiro Hayashi. Fully clothed, she lay down on the couch, and the 2 practitioners began the treatment. One man working on her head, the other on her abdomen. As their hands lightly touched her, they would comment on what they were sensing. Oh, yes, your gallbladder is not so good. You must have a lot of pain here. And there is a lump here. It could be a tumor, and so on. And when they made such observations, she could feel the heat from their hands, but she did not understand how they knew these things, and she wondered if the hospital had called them. How did they know? She was very curious, but decided to save her questions for the next day, when she would return at an earlier hour to allow time for such inquiries. The next day, the doctor's sister again went with her to the clinic, but Mrs. Takada lay down on the couch, and before Mrs. Takada lay down on the couch, she looked under it to see if there was any wiring connection to some sort of instrument or battery that created the heat. She looked at the ceiling to see if there were any wires from above, and in both cases there were none. Therefore, she assumed the practitioners must have instruments in their pockets, so she decided to test them. As the treatment began, she reached up and grabbed the sleeve of the man treating her right side. Startled by this, he took a tissue from his kimono and offered it to her, but she declined politely, saying she was interested in his pocket because she thought he had some sort of machine there. He began to laugh, and he shook his sleeves so that she could see that they were empty, while Dr. Hayashi came to see what happened. She voiced her curiosity, wondering how the practitioner could tell where her pain was and what was amiss, saying, "I know his hands are giving me the message, for they are hot and I can feel the vibration. They are not ordinary hands, so he must have a connection with some kind of power." "Yes," Dr. Hayashi replied, "he does, but it is not electricity. This is Reiki." She asked him to explain more fully, since she was not completely familiar with the language. Reiki is the Japanese word for universal life energy. In English, it sounds like Rei-ki, and it comes from space, from the universe. The only thing that is different between you and us is that we have the contact with the universal life force, and you do not. My practitioners all have this contact, and they can use it. They are applying it now, and they are filling your body with life energy. This is so big we cannot measure it, so deep we cannot fathom it. Therefore, in Japanese, we call it Reiki. She thanked him, although she understood little of what he'd said. He continued, "Do you have radio in Hawaii? When the radio station broadcasts, there are no lines connected from your station to your house, yet you turn on the receiver and you contact the station. You receive what they are sending. Because we are not radio technicians, we do not know how. The principles are the same with Reiki. This energy goes through space without wires, and we know this great force can be contacted. Once contact is made, the energy flow is automatic. It is universal, limitless energy. When you have the switch on, the power is unlimited. When you want to stop, you just take your hands away. It's very simple." On the way back to the hospital, Mrs. Takata's companion, the doctor's sister, told her that in Japan the women were silent and refrained from expressing themselves and displaying emotions in public. However, Dr. Hayashi had explained to his practitioners that although Mrs. Takata looked Japanese and had a Japanese name, she was an American, and her questions were proper for a Western woman, not strange or rude. Then she requested that Mrs. Takata not ask any more questions at the clinic, but to save them until she returned home, and she would answer them. She offered to come to Mrs. Takata's room after her day's work and give her a treatment, and while that was going on, they could discuss Reiki. Mrs. Takata was amazed to learn that this lady had taken the lessons and could do Reiki healing also. That evening, she gave Mrs. Takata a complete treatment and confirmed that what the practitioners had said, stating, "Yes, what they told you is correct. I find the same vibration. Everyone diagnoses the same because the vibrations are the same. You are the one putting forth these vibrations, and we feel it in our hands." Mrs. Takata wanted to know why she had taken this training, since she worked at a hospital, and the lady told her the story. She had had a severe dysentery and was near death, in a coma. Her daughter away at school, she was getting ready to come to the hospital when a classmate asked her to go first to see Dr. Hayashi and to seek his assistance. Hearing about her mother, he agreed to go to the hospital, where he treated her, and with that one Reiki healing treatment, she regained consciousness. He continued to treat her until she was recovered, and when she was strong enough, she took the training, offering her assistance in her brother's hospital whenever patients did not want drugs or painkillers. She also used Reiki to help in the food preparation, for as the dietitian, she could touch the food and vitalize it, filling it with life energy to benefit the patients. When she heard this story, Mrs. Takata became very interested in learning to do Reiki healing also, but the doctor's sister gave her no encouragement, saying that Japan had given many, many cultures to the outside world: kendo, judo, karate, tea ceremony, flower arrangement, but not Reiki healing. It was being very carefully guarded and was not to leave Japan. This was difficult for Mrs. Takata to accept, as she felt that she had just discovered hope for life with Reiki healing. But if that was the rule, she would say no more. She was determined, however, to find a way. Although she went daily to Dr. Hayashi's clinic for a treatment, she stayed in the hospital. Here she began her meditations, praying for guidance, for a way to gain entrance into the Reiki healing classes. She had come this far to find the answer to her health problems, and having found it, she could not believe the door was closed to her. Finally, it occurred to her to ask the help of the surgeon. After 3 weeks of Reiki healing treatments, the doctor met her in the hall one day and inquired about her progress. He was very pleased to see how well she looked, commenting that she was well on her way to recovery and to keep up the good work. Here was her opportunity to take courage, so she asked him to help her in her desire to take the training. He responded that there were rules and there was etiquette, and he could do nothing since this association did not want to accept outsiders. She pressed her case, saying that she could not come to Japan every time she needed a treatment, and that she wanted to learn Reiki healing in order to stand on her own and support herself and her family. With this plea, he said he would try to help, although he could promise nothing. He wrote to Dr. Hayashi, putting forth her request, and this was no ordinary letter. Instead, the doctor took a long scroll and wrote it himself with his brush and ink. He instructed his sister to deliver this letter into the hands of Mrs. Hayashi. When it was given to Dr. Hayashi by his wife, he was very impressed, saying he was highly honored to receive such a letter, handwritten by this great surgeon. Dr. Hayashi called the directors of the association to a meeting where this appeal was read. It was decided to allow Mrs. Takata to become an honorary member, special privilege which would permit her to take the Reiki healing lessons. And when the next class was offered, she was shown how to enroll. Along with the other students, she was empowered by Dr. Hayashi to receive the universal life energy to make the contact with this limitless force. He told them this contact would be made in 4 small steps called initiations, and 4 days would be required to complete the first degree of Reiki healing. During the lessons, he explained the treatment. The first day dealing with the body above the neck, the head, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the throat, and the conditions and diseases which could be found in these areas. On the second day, they were taught how to treat the front of the body, the chest, the abdomen, with all the organs located there. The lesson for the third day dealt with the back, which included the spine, the nervous system, the organs. They were shown where and how to place their hands to permit the life energy to flow to the body of the patient, allowing Reiki to balance the condition or ailment so healing could occur. On the 4th day, Dr. Hayashi discussed how to heal in acute cases such as accidents, and he also spoke of the spiritual side of Reiki healing, for which there were given the 5 ideals. Just for today, do not worry. Just for today, do not anger. Honor your teachers, your father, your mother, and your neighbors. Count your blessings and show appreciation for your food. Earn your living honestly. Be kind to everything that has life. They were taught that there is always the cause and the effect. Remove the cause and there shall be no effect. Reiki healing will be effective as long as the practitioner believes it, applies it, and continues to use it. In her own case, she knew Reiki healing to be powerful. After just 3 weeks of daily treatments, she was much better. Her body had rid itself of its toxins. All the aches and pains had disappeared. Her color was better than it had ever been, and her strength was returning. She felt light as a feather, and she could move easily. And by the end of 4 months, her respiratory problems were gone, and the gallstones had come out. She was so well by this time that she felt she should practice the Reiki healing that she had learned in the class. When 6 months had passed, she went to Kyoto as planned, where the services were held for her husband. It was time also for her parents to return to Hawaii, so after seeing them off on the steamship, she moved to the Hayashi home, accepting their invitation to live with them while she learned to be a Reiki healing practitioner. When the first patients started arriving at 7 each morning, Mrs. Takata was in the clinic with the other 16 practitioners, where for 5 hours there was not an idle moment. The afternoons were used for house calls, sometimes requiring a train ride or two of 2 or 3 hours out into the country and back again after treating the patient. Following her evening meal, she gave the report of her afternoon's activities to Dr. Hayashi and his family. This was her daily routine for 1 year, and every day was devoted to the practice of Reiki healing. At times, Dr. Hayashi took her with him on house calls into very lovely private homes, some belonging to titled people. One of her memorable experiences was a visit with Dr. Hayashi to an archbishop of the Jodo mission sect Buddhist in Kamakura, who, having severe laryngitis, had lost his voice for several years. No longer able to perform the duties of his office, he was forced into early retirement. After his 4th Reiki healing treatment, he experienced a reaction in which his throat rid itself of this toxic condition, and he began to recover rapidly. Dr. Hayashi was pleased, saying total recovery could be expected within 21 days, and he gave the case over to Mrs. Takata. With the return of his voice, the Archbishop was reinstated and sent to Hawaii to head the work of this group, where there, as well as on the American mainland. She met him later in Honolulu, where he often invited her to breakfast after his early morning service. During this year, she worked very long hours, and she had no time to visit shops or call on friends, for everything was for Reiki healing. She observed what kind of patients came and how well they responded and how long the treatments took. She soon learned that with every condition, it was as Dr. Hayashi had taught: remove the cause, and there shall be no effect. At the end of her training, she was surprised to learn that every move she had made during that year had been noted. So she was happy that she had done the proper thing and now was allowed the privilege of receiving the 2nd degree in Reiki healing, the practitioner's level. Before she left Tokyo, she asked Dr. Hayashi one question, which had been bothering her. In all those months at the clinic, she had never encountered one poor person, no shabby patients, no laborers, so she asked if he refused to treat such people. He laughed, replying, since this was a very good question, he would answer it. He told her that all those who entered his door were upper class, even titled, people of wealth, education, and intelligence. When they were ill, they could afford the very best doctors and the very best hospitals, but they sought out more than surgery and drugs. They had Reiki consciousness, so they came to him. The others did not have this understanding, and when illness occurred, they thought the need was for hospitals and doctors and nurses. If called, he would go, no matter how poor they were, but their beliefs were different, so they did not accept him and his drugless treatment. He also assured her when she became an experienced practitioner, she too would find this to be so. Reiki, Chapter 4. Having completed her training with Dr. Hayashi, Mrs. Takata returned home to Kauai in the summer of 1937. A few weeks later, Dr. Hayashi and his daughter arrived to spend 6 months visiting and helping establish Reiki healing in Hawaii. It was decided that Honolulu would be the best place to offer classes, so they rented 2 hotel bungalows and began offering free lectures and demonstrations of this healing art. The editor of the Japanese newspaper was very helpful, publishing pictures and articles in support of Reiki healing. So within a short time, It was well received by the people. Soon they rented a larger hall where lectures and classes were given by Dr. Hayashi, with Mrs. Takata assisting. In February 1938, when it was time for Dr. Hayashi to return to Tokyo, his friends gave a banquet in his honor, where they presented him with many gifts and mementos of his visit to Hawaii, expressions of gratitude for allowing Reiki healing to be taken beyond Japan. He used this occasion to announce publicly that Mrs. Takata was a Reiki master, chosen for this work because she had passed many tests and proven herself worthy, so it was widely known that she was qualified to continue the Reiki healing practice and to teach classes in Hawaii. At this time, the Archbishop of the Jodo Mission was planning his first trip to the American mainland to visit the churches and to meet with the ministers in California. None of the 12 members in his entourage spoke English, so he asked Mrs. Takata to join them as their interpreter. She felt this was an honor, and she also needed a vacation, so she accepted his invitation. She traveled extensively along the West Coast with these ministers, and when the tour was over, she continued on to Chicago, entering the National College of Drugless Physicians to study various therapies as well as anatomy. And when she completed her studies in July 1938, she returned to Honolulu with confidence, knowing much more about the physical and technical side of the human body. She thought back to that October morning, almost 3 years previously, when she had gone to Dr. Hayashi's clinic for her first treatment, and it seemed a miracle that she was now ready to begin her own Reiki healing practice. In late December of that year, she was invited to make a presentation of Reiki healing at Kamula Waimea at her first visit to the Big Island of Hawaii. Kamula was one of the larger towns on the island, and some of the citizens of that community were waiting for introductions at the home of her host and hostess. They were not convinced of the value of what she was teaching, so they informed her that Reiki healing would have to be proven here, and gave her 2 weeks to work with 2 patients. The first had a chronic heart condition which prevented any physical activity, and the other had acute tonsillitis, with surgery planned when he was stronger. It was a great challenge, but these people said that they were willing to learn Reiki healing if the 2 showed good results with the treatments. Both patients responded quickly to the healing energy, and at the end of the allotted time, the woman with the heart condition was able to be up and about, visiting her friends and walking to the store to shop. The man who had experienced a reaction which released the toxins from his tonsils, so he had recovered rapidly and did not need the surgery. The response of the community was gratifying, for when people came to sign up for lessons, there were 55 students, too many for one class, so Mrs. Takata divided them into several smaller classes. When she had completed the teaching, she was told that this was only the beginning of the Reiki healing in that area, and they asked her to return every 6 months to conduct further classes. Many of the people were farmers in this part of the island, and this was a cowboy country as well, with very large cattle ranches nearby. So the classes she taught had far-reaching effects. The farmers energized their seeds and plants with Reiki, producing bountiful crops. The chicken farmers used it to increase their success by placing their hands in the brooders with the baby chicks each day for 15 minutes so that their flocks were healthy with minimal loss. Even the egg production of the hens increased. The cowboys experienced benefits too. As they worked with the cattle, they reported almost no loss of calves since they began to hold the newborn animals and vitalize them with Reiki. And they also worked with success on the less productive cows, giving them treatments so that there would be more calves for the ranch. In 1939, she traveled again from Honolulu to the Big Island, first teaching in Kona and on a later visit in Pahoa. Her first year as a practitioner had been a busy one, so when she received a call from 2 school teachers on the Big Island of Hawaii asking if she would take a short vacation and visit them, this was a welcome invitation. She had seen the Honolulu newspaper articles and were interested. They had seen the Honolulu newspaper articles and were interested in learning more about the Reiki healing. When she arrived by boat, she was met in Hilo by one of the teachers, and as they drove towards home, this woman was asking her many questions about Reiki healing. At one point along the way, she stopped at a residence where she had an errand, and as they entered the yard, Mrs. Takata noticed a sign offering the house and lot for sale. The old man who lived there was alone, playing a card game, and when Mrs. Takata was introduced as being from Honolulu, he misunderstood and thought she was interested in the property. He threw his cards into the air, rejoicing that she was going to buy his house. The teacher was very embarrassed and did not know what to say, so Mrs. Takata told him she had not brought a down payment since she had not planned to buy real estate. His response was, "Who is talking about a down payment? All he required was a monthly sum to provide his income." It was a beautiful property with an acre of land and a well-built 4-bedroom house and a half basement. There was a large garage in the back and adjoining quarters for a maid. She looked about and she realized that with some repairs and alterations, this house was large enough for a Reiki healing center, as well as providing private living quarters for the family. She made a quick decision to accept his terms, and since she could manage the price he was asking, this would enable her to bring her parents and other members from Kauai to live with her and her daughters in this lovely place, so it seemed appropriate to move to Hilo from Honolulu. Feeling as though she owned a palace, she found carpenters to begin the alterations, creating not only a home but also a Reiki center for those who needed help. Before the carpentry was finished, and before she could even get settled with furniture in the house, the 2 school teachers came each day for treatment. And when they began to get well, they asked to join her next Reiki healing class, and so her acceptance in Hilo was immediate. When the building project was completed, she had 2 treatment rooms, a very large waiting room, a private living area for the family. She hired a yard boy to attend to the garden, so within a short time, a transformation had taken place with this property, and she was ready to offer Reiki healing to the Big Island. People from all over the island were soon coming to her for treatments, and she was teaching classes as well. Almost overnight, she had become popular, due mainly to the manager of one of the sugar plantations. He had fallen from his horse, injuring himself and creating problems for his legs and back. So he asked her to come and try to give him some relief from the pain. She requested 30 days to work on him, to which he agreed, and on the 29th day, he was fully recovered from the accident. Since the plantation he managed included several villages, his influence was very great. He was so pleased with his recovery that he offered to send her to these villages to give lectures and demonstrations, after which she could teach classes. So he called in his staff to help organize these visits. They hired a little sampan bus to transport her to the various clubhouses where the people had gathered, and in this way the story of Reiki healing spread throughout the area, with many learning to do it for themselves. At one of these demonstrations was a blacksmith from the plantation. He was suffering from a piece of steel in his eye, which the doctor had been unable to remove. He asked if she would use him as a model and release the steel, as it was very painful. The area was bandaged, so she worked on his eyes and head for about 20 minutes, placing her hands on top of the gauze. When he blinked, there was no pain, and the next morning, when he went to see the doctor, there was no sign of the steel. It was gone. With only one treatment, the foreign body was removed. This amazed the students in the class and gave them much confidence in Reiki, for although the treatment was given from the top of a bandage, it was effective. When she went to another village to conduct classes, the minister of the church came to her, telling of a man who had been bedridden for several years, unable to walk after an accident which had injured his back. He had read about Reiki healing in the newspaper articles and wanted very much to meet Mrs. Takata. There was one problem, the minister explained. This man lived a long distance up into the mountains, with a road going only a short distance. The rest of the trip would be by horseback. She was not a very good rider, but she was willing to give it a try. So they drove for half an hour in the car, and then they followed the trail for 2 hours more on horses. The family was very happy that they had come, and after lunch she began treatment on the injured man. And so with much time on his hands, he read many magazines and newspapers and was well versed in Reiki healing from the articles in the Honolulu paper, and asked many questions. She told him she was not a healer. The real healer is Reiki, and Reiki is God power, so this would determine how well he responded. They discussed the accident, which left him paralyzed from the waist down. His upper body was all right, but he had no feeling in his lower half and could not walk. Since the wife served as his nurse and helper too, she was confined to their house by his condition. So it was suggested that this would be a good time for her to take the Reiki classes and to learn how to give a treatment. During the 5 days that Mrs. Takata stayed with them, the wife worked with her and mastered the art of Reiki healing. The sense of feeling began to return to her husband's body, so she knew he was responding well, and there was hope for recovery. Other family members later took the training so that they could help whenever they visited, and with daily treatments from his family in less than a year, this man was able to walk about his house and garden with only a cane to steady him. Naturally, many people heard about these cases and wanted to learn more. Even the staff at the Plantation Hospital became very interested and opened their doors to Reiki, offering a place to conduct classes. Mrs. Takata's clinic in Hilo thrived, and she was very busy doing treatments there, as well as traveling throughout the islands, teaching Reiki healing. And there were rewarding reports wherever she went, demonstrating many times the truth that Reiki healing works on everything that has life, on plants, fowls, and animals, as well as human beings. In early 1940, she had a vivid dream in which she saw Dr. Hayashi in a formal kimono of white silk. He walked back and forth 3 times, and she could hear the swish of the silk upon the tatami mats. It seemed to be real, not a dream. This disturbed her, so she wrote inquiring about him and was reassured when she learned that all was well. A few weeks later, she felt an urgency to go to Japan, and when she arrived in April, the Hayashis were very surprised to see her. The master's greeting puzzled her when he said, although he had wanted her to come sometime that year, she had arrived too soon. He suggested she go to Kyoto and to study hydrotherapy, which would be helpful in her Reiki practice. Mrs. Hayashi spoke privately to her and explained that her husband had decided to go into transition on his own accord. He had not yet set the date, so when Mrs. Takata should receive a wire from them, she should come immediately to Atami, to where they would be staying. Mrs. Takata proceeded to Kyoto for the training in hydrotherapy, and on May 9th, when she received the telegram to come at once, she took the night train to Atami, arriving at 5 a.m. and when she reached the Hayashi house, she questioned one of the maids as to the health of Dr. Hayashi, and she learned he was very well, so she was unsure that she had understood the meaning of transition in Japanese. The family welcomed her at breakfast, and they appeared quite cheerful. Nothing seemed different as usual until Dr. Hayashi said that starting at 10 o'clock that morning, there would be many people arriving, and he would like Mrs. Takata to greet them and act as hostess, helping seat the guests. He had invited his friends and students to witness his transition, and he expressed his pleasure that she also would be there for this occasion. She wondered how anyone could sit and talk calmly in this way, but Dr. Hayashi said that he had already set a time between 1 and 1:20 p.m., and within that time period he would go into transition. Furthermore, the family had decided that Mrs. Takata would be the proper person to take over his work in Reiki healing. His daughter was married, did not wish to work. His son wanted to go into business, but was not inclined to continue the clinic, and Mrs. Hayashi wanted to retire to her country home. Therefore, they had all agreed that Mrs. Takata was their choice to become Dr. Hayashi's successor. This was more than an honorary position, for she would be given all the Tokyo property, with the clinic and the house, and he had written a document to the association so that the people in Japan would understand he had chosen Mrs. Takata to be his successor. Mrs. Takata had been told what was planned, but she found it difficult to believe that a person could go into transition this way, and she thought she had misunderstood. None of the family expressed any sorrow or shed tears, and she was bewildered by it all. At 1 o'clock, Dr. Hayashi entered the room where the guests and the family were gathered. He was dressed in the same white kimono which Mrs. Takata had seen in her dream, and when he walked across the mats, she could hear the swish of the silk and feel the cool air, just as she had in the dream. He greeted them and explained why he had made this momentous decision. He knew that war was inevitable between Japan and America, and being a patriot citizen as well as an officer in the Naval Reserve, he would be called to active duty aboard a battleship and would have to kill many people. As a devout Buddhist and a Reiki master, he could not destroy life. He spoke of having lived a life of peace and understanding, of working to help people rather than to kill people. He had chosen to make a peaceful transition at this time, although he was only 62 and in perfect health. He thanked them for coming, saying this was not death, for life goes on. Therefore, transition meant great change, not death, and there should be no tears or sorrow, and even his family understood and had none. Dr. Hayashi told them the first sign had come, but he had felt no pain. 10 minutes later, there was another sign. Again, no pain. He asked Mrs. Hayashi to position herself behind him, and with the third sign, the master went into transition peacefully with a great dignity, a smile on his face as he fell backward into his wife's waiting arms. Dr. Hayashi was taken to Tokyo, where he lay and stayed at the Reiki Center and was visited by people from all over Japan who came to express their respect for this great man. For a full week, this continued, and his body showed no signs of deterioration. After 7 days, when the cremation and the Zen funeral ceremony were completed, Mrs. Hayashi began packing their belongings to move to her country home. Mrs. Takata had been meditating on her own dilemma, being torn between the two duties of motherhood and Reiki healing. She asked Mrs. Hayashi's help, proposing that she remain in Tokyo to supervise the clinic and continue the work, while Mrs. Takata would return to Hawaii to complete the rearing of her daughters and see them settled in their own homes, after which she would come to Japan to dedicate her life to Reiki healing. Mrs. Hayashi was very understanding and agreed to take care of the Reiki Center. So Mrs. Takata returned to Hawaii, knowing she had left this work in good hands. With the coming of World War II, their communication was broken, and it was several years after the war before Mrs. Takata returned to Tokyo for a visit. She found Mrs. Hayashi in the same place, but great changes had occurred. This was the only building in the area that was untouched by devastation, with its remaining in perfect condition, while there was only rubble and debris all around as far as the eyes could see. The scars of war on the city were very deep, and during the occupation, all possible spaces had been commandeered for refugee houses. So Mrs. Takata's private quarters had been given to shelter several families. She had moved into the clinic area, converting it into living spaces for more refugees, particularly orphaned teenage girls, to whom she taught skills such as sewing, which permitted them to earn their living honestly. Mrs. Hayashi was very apologetic that she had been unable to continue the Reiki healing clinic, and expressed her concern that Mrs. Takata would disapprove. But Mrs. Takata knew she had done her best simply to survive, and only had admiration for her courage. She formally returned the property to Mrs. Hayashi, telling her not to shed any more tears over it, as she would go back to Hawaii and spread Reiki healing to the world from the center there. After almost a decade of success with her healing center in Hilo, Mrs. Takata returned to Honolulu, where she made her home for the next 30 years, and there she continued to work with Reiki healing, maintaining a treatment center in the city. She also traveled among the islands, conducting classes as usual, making an occasional trip to the American mainland, but the greater emphasis was in Hawaii, where she had hundreds of Reiki healing students. During the fall of 1973, she was invited to teach a large group on an island off the coast of Washington State, and this was the start of 7 very busy years. As the requests for classes began to fill her schedule, she traveled to the Pacific Coast, the Midwest, East, South, Southwest, and into Canada, and with these demands, there was less and less time for the clinic work. The teaching had become a full-time occupation. As the groups continued to grow in size and number, she was unable to keep up with the requests for lessons. The needs for more teachers was obvious, so she began training some of her students and had initiated 22 of them as Reiki masters by the time she went into transition in December 1980. Reiki, Chapter 5. Even in the 8th decade of her life, Mrs. Takata was a very attractive woman, small-boned, less than 5 feet in height, and weighing slightly over 90 pounds. Her motions were quick and decisive, and she moved with the ease of a young person, upright and graceful. In these later years, she still had the fresh, smooth skin, like that of a child, with few lines and wrinkles in her face. Her gray hair was only betraying sign of age. Her appearance belied her years, and few people upon meeting her for the first time would have suspected that she was an octogenarian. One such person was an official in charge of senior citizen discounts on the tickets he was selling, who accepted her word that she was eligible for this consideration, but he flatly refused to believe she was almost 80 years old. 65 perhaps, but not 80. She not only taught Reiki healing, she lived it. Her life was an exceptional demonstration of dedication to the ideals and principles of Reiki healing, taught by the masters who preceded her. She truly cared for people, often putting their welfare and comfort before her own, and she offered treatment freely to those she met along the way, at times for only a few minutes. Better some Reiki than none at all, she would say. She was very aware of hers being quite small, and upon one occasion commented on the large size of one of her students' hands. "Oh, what wonderful Reiki hands. You can cover so much area at one time." Small hers may have been, but they were powerful. She was a clear channel for the transmission of this healing energy, bringing 45 years of daily experience to her work. She lived quite simply, advocating a diet of many fresh vegetables and fruits, whole grains, fish and chicken, and although she would eat red meats, she did so sparingly. Her favorite home remedy was a mixture of fresh vegetables, watercress, beets, carrots, and celery, which she pureed in the blender and carried with her on her travels. She often recommended this juice to others, saying that it was an excellent blood builder which energized the whole body. Golfing, at which she was quite accomplished, was her favorite exercise, and when she was in Honolulu, she walked to the golf course each morning to play. She liked to travel and especially enjoyed sightseeing in new areas that she had not previously visited, often seeking out the local golf courses. In the way of many who have known poverty and difficult times, Mrs. Takata was quite conservative in money matters. She had worked very hard and earned her own way in life, and as she became more affluent, her habits of economy remained deeply ingrained. She spent very little on her wardrobe, and although she dressed neatly, often colorfully, it was without stylish distinction. Those who knew her very well did not interpret the spiritual precept, "Just for today, do not anger," to mean that she should never anger. She had a healthy temper and at times would display it, but these times were few. Few, and involved only extreme conditions. When these did occur, she immediately responded, saying what needed to be said, doing what needed to be done to clear the air, and then restore balance. Her way was to take care of it today and not carry such energy over to the morrow. Mrs. Takata's life was not easy, being filled with many obstacles and responsibilities, which she turned into opportunities for growth. She worked very hard, suffered grief, sadness, overcame these difficulties, and in the process developed great strength. Although her social demeanor was quiet and unassuming, with the politeness of a well-bred Japanese lady, by no means could she be considered weak. She knew what she wanted, and she always figured out a way to achieve her goals. She had a lively personality with the simplicity and open curiosity of a child, asking questions and exploring new ideas, ever probing and learning. She combined this simplicity with an insight which is found only in wisdom. So, to those with whom she felt a close connection, she offered advice. A student in one of her early classes remembers her not only as his Reiki healing teacher, but also as a woman who would give him lectures, counseling him for hours when he felt that he had been demoted and wanted to quit his job, telling him, "You can't let things get you down. You are more valuable. As an outdoor man, a town man is not your way. Always have in mind to do good things. Also in the community, then you will get ahead and you will be respected." Her personal conversation was filled with admonishments, and she advised one student, "If you plan to remarry, marry a young man. If you marry an old man, he'll just get sick. Then you'll have to take care of him." She often reminded her classes to give thanks and to express gratitude for what they received. One student took this to heart, saying that one must always be aware that Reiki was a gift from God, and whenever healing occurred, the practitioner could not take any credit for it. Mrs. Takata smiled, palms together, and quietly responded, "God does not care if you brag a little. As a teacher, she spoke simply and with power. This is the way you do Reiki. Yet those who participated in more than one class found that she adjusted her instruction for each group, never presenting the information in the same way twice. At times she would tell her students to start the treatment with the head. Other times she'd tell them to start with the abdomen, or she might say, it really doesn't matter where you start as long as the complete treatment is given. She encouraged them to develop their intuitive feel for Reiki and to do what seemed right for them individually while observing the basic hand placements which she taught. Her method of presentation was an oral one, combined with demonstration, and she did not encourage note-taking, saying, just do it, do Reiki, 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 and then you shall know. She was a strict teacher, and should students be so rude as to whisper in class, she did not hesitate to draw them back into the business at hand, clapping her hands together and saying imperiously, students, pay attention to what I am saying. She had a ready smile with a quiet humor, finding much to amuse her in life because she was a very alert, quick-witted, little escaped her attention. An excellent judge of people, her assessments were at times uncomfortably accurate, although she seldom voiced publicly any personal criticism. Instead, she focused upon the positive and offered compliments wherever possible. Along with her strength came an implacable quality where Reiki healing was concerned. She allowed most of the foibles of humanity to flow by without comment, but she did not accept any nonsense in the discussion of Reiki healing. She took her work very seriously, clarifying without hesitation the misconceptions held by another. When she shook her finger at someone, it emphasized her convictions gained through many years of experience, and there was no arguing with her on this subject. She was the authority, and there was no mistaking it. Reiki, Chapter 6. No one has ever been able to explain exactly what Reiki is. However, it is neither electrical nor magnetic in nature. Mrs. Takata emphasized, it is simple, it is natural, it is scientific. There is no magic involved, no hocus pocus, nor is there a need to create an altered state of consciousness in order to do this work. It is well to remain focused on the whole treatment, but Reiki is active automatically whenever the hands are applied to the area of need. She called this energy by various names: God power, cosmic energy, universal life force, radionic waves, etheric waves, prana, mana. She likened it to a broadcast from a radio transmitter, unseen, unheard, until a receiver picks it up and converts it into sound. In the same way, Reiki is always present, and we are unaware of it until the contact is made through the training, after which it can be received and converted into healing energy. Reiki is not a technique or a method or a process. It just is. In an intellectual sense, Reiki cannot be taught, for the role of the master is to empower the student with the energy being transferred during the 4 brief ceremonies called initiations. These initiations open certain inner centers of the body so that the energy can be channeled easily and safely. Once the contact has been made and the energy transmitted through the touch of the master, the flow is sensed in the hands, usually felt as heat, sometimes as a vibration or a tingling, occasionally in another form. Each person is unique, and there are infinite expressions of this universal life force. Instruction is given then in the use of this energy. Specific hand positions are taught for the sake of expedience, since long practice has shown these to work efficiently. However, there is no wrong way to do Reiki. Thus, there is no right way. When the training is completed, the energy is always on, so that the decision a student makes is whether or not to give the treatment. The practitioner has no control over what will happen, as the responsibility for whatever occurs lies with the one being treated. This is not a conscious mental decision, but one which resides deeply within and involves choices from a level beyond intellectual structuring. It is the body's own wisdom which determines whether or not it will accept the healing energy, the amount and the duration of the transmission, and what it will do with this. The practitioner does not create this energy, but is simply the channel through which it is transferred. And in accepting this role of vessel, there is no attachment to results. One does not become a healer, for Reiki is the healer. Mrs. Takata taught that Reiki is harmless and cannot hurt anyone. It does not destroy, but instead builds and protects. It will vitalize all forms of life, plants, animals, fish, fowl, and humans from infancy to old age, and it can only do good. It will work through all fibers. So it is unnecessary for one to disrobe in order to receive a treatment. As the hands are placed over the area of need, the Reiki is unhampered by layers of clothing. It will also pass through wood, metal, casts, even rubber. With a second-degree training, one does not even have to touch the person being treated, for this energy can be directed to any place at a distance. Attunements and conditions are labeled either chronic or acute. The chronic ones are of longer standing and likely will require long-term treatment. They have not developed overnight, and much Reiki healing will be needed to bring the body back into balance. Most adults have toxic conditions which need to be cleared from the body before the healing can be completed, so a reaction occurs. This healing often brings discomfort, such as headache, nausea, or diarrhea, as the body rids itself of this toxic material. And these are positive signs that indicate the healing is moving forward. The acute cases, such as accidents and sudden illness, recover much more quickly and often with one treatment, and the reactions are not so severe. Several conditions are needed to provide an effective channel for this energy. The most important is that one must believe it, for to doubt and not accept Reiki reduces the ability to work with it. The people being treated do not have to hold such belief, as this is not a test of their faith, but the practitioner must believe. Secondly, it must be used. Just as an unused muscle will atrophy, so will Reiki weaken and fade away when it's not exercised. In using, it must only be for the purpose of helping and healing. There is an inherent wisdom in Reiki, which will not permit it to be misused, and it will disappear of its own accord if there is any abuse. In essence, Reiki is unlimited, drawing from the inexhaustible store of universal energy. Yet there are times when it appears not to bring about a cure. Mrs. Takata taught that diseases which have been diagnosed terminal, being in their latter stages, usually will not be reversed. These are chronic cases, and there is insufficient time to complete the healing. However, the transition is made easier by lowering stress and reducing pain, and this is a great comfort. It will not remove birth defects, nor will it grow a new organ which has been removed surgically, but it will bring relief from the symptoms resulting from these conditions. The overall effect of Reiki is to help bring the body into balance so that it can heal itself, and this works as well on one's own self as it does on others. Mrs. Takata stressed the need to work first with self. You are number one, she would say, Then, if you have time, treat your family and your friends, but in Reiki healing, you first, then other people. Reiki is natural, she would declare, and nothing unnatural occurs during the healing, although it be accelerated dramatically. When an organ or a gland is operating below par, this energy works to stimulate its natural function. Diabetes, for example. Note how quickly, diabetics, for example, note how quickly their insulin intake is reduced when Reiki is applied. Broken bones knit very rapidly, telescoping the process from months into weeks. Since Reiki means universal life energy, it is the essence of life itself, and we are all born with it. In the Usui system of Reiki, contact is made with this universal force, which then works automatically to heal the person on all levels, and those who take this training soon realize that it is an invaluable investment, for it is everlasting, instantly available, and helps raise the level of one's vitality for physical and mental health, as well as enhancing spiritual awareness. Mrs. Takata often spoke of becoming a complete whole, for we must have not only physical well-being, but mental and spiritual balance as well. Only then can we say we are whole. This is what we receive from Reiki, which she calls God power. Mrs. Takata emphasized several characteristics which distinguish Reiki healing, telling her students, everyone has the potential. We are all composed of this universal energy, and we can use it for healing. It's a matter of choice. You can treat yourself as well as others. You do not become depleted when healing others. As you give Reiki healing, you also receive it, and you become energized, for you are working with universal life force, not your personal energy. You become a channel for healing and take neither credit nor responsibility for the results. You do not take on the symptoms of those whom you are treating. Mrs. Takata taught that it is not necessary to know anatomy to treat with Reiki, since the hands will respond when they locate the source of the problem, and the student does not have to analyze what to do. She encouraged the development of this as an intuitive art, not a rigid system saying Reiki will guide you. Let the Reiki hands find it. They will know what to do. Although she knew anatomy, she sometimes used fanciful names for certain areas, such as the solar plexus, which she called the big motor, saying it was the main center from which energy flows to other parts of the body. She emphasized the treating of the abdomen, the foundation treatment, teaching that most ailments and disharmonies in the body originate here from poorly functioning organs with low vitality. She often spoke of the need to find the cause of the condition, for it was not enough to treat only the effect. Find the cause and you will remove the effect. Most people come for help because they have a symptom, and it is well to put the hands upon the specific area to relieve the pain and discomfort. However, it's better to do the complete treatment and let Reiki discover what is causing the problem, which may or may not be located in the same place. Only when the cause is removed will the benefit of the treatment be long-lasting. If poor health habits, such as faulty nutrition and lack of exercise, are involved, it will be necessary to change these patterns if there is to be progress, for Reiki will only give temporary relief in these cases. In her classes, she demonstrated the proper hand positions for the complete treatment, and she noted that there are 3 major areas to be considered: the front, especially the abdomen, the head, and the back. Here are found all the organs and the glands, as well as the major systems, so a system will be vitalized And in order for the Reiki healing to be done, it does not matter so long as the full treatment is given, but it usually starts with the head or the abdomen. And if there is a specific need to work on arms, legs, or other parts of the body, the hands are placed directly on that area. And she would tell her students, except for shock or accident, use the full treatment, and this is the same for all things. Don't try to take only parts. The body is a complete unit. So whenever possible, treat it completely. Start with the abdomen or the head, it doesn't matter, and then proceed with the whole treatment. It is the same for all, whether physical or mental. There is no difference in the treatment. At times, this is not possible, and she would advise, do what you can. Some Reiki is better than none at all.